He bludgeoned Jeffrey Dahmer and another inmate to death in the prison gym.
Welcome to Watch Mojo. And today we're examining 10 American killers who were murdered in prison.
Whitey Bulger lasted less than 24 hours after being transferred to that high-security prison in West Virginia.
For this list, we'll be looking at American killers who were themselves killed by other inmates while serving time. Which of these stories do you find most interesting? Let us know in the comments. Leroy Martin. Family man Leroy Martin was working at a textile mill in South Carolina when he embarked on his killing spree. Between May 1967 and February 1968, Martin abducted and killed 4 females, 2 of whom were teenagers.
And I was getting a little eerie feeling as we got deeper into the woods, and finally one of the deputies said, "Here she is," and she was covered up with some brush.
Martin became known as the Gaffney Strangler. Gaffney being the small town in which the killings occurred.
You tell the sheriff his boys better catch me real soon or I'm gonna take me another one.
Why don't you just turn yourself in?
Nah, y'all gonna have to hunt me down and shoot me dead like the dog I am.
He was eventually arrested in February 1968 and given 4 life sentences, 1 for each of his victims. Martin was serving time in the state's Central Correctional Institution when he was stabbed and killed by another inmate named Kenneth Rumsey. Donald Leroy Evans. We don't know much about the crimes of Donald Leroy Evans. What we do know is that his killings occurred between 1985 and 1991, the latter year being when he was finally arrested. Evans targeted people at parks and public rest stops, and he has been officially linked to 3 deaths. However, he later confessed to killing over 70 people throughout the country. While claims like this are often taken with a grain of salt, authorities were able to link his information to various cold cases, which lends credibility to his confession.
Although many people are skeptical of Evans' claims, they are now listening to him. Just recently, Evans called a Biloxi reporter from prison and gave names, dates, and places in the disappearance of at least 3 girls.
Evans was given the death penalty in Mississippi, but he was stabbed to death by another inmate before he could be executed. Edwin Kaprat. This man has the somewhat bizarre moniker, the Granny Killer, owing to the advanced ages of his victims. Edwin Kaprat killed 6 people between 1991 and 1993. He would often harass elderly individuals with threatening phone calls and commit acts of arson. Some of his victims were found beaten to death, with some subsequently consumed by the fires that he'd started. Kaprat was eventually arrested and confessed to the killings, leading to a conviction of first-degree murder. While on death row at Florida State Prison, both Kaprat and a man named Charles Street were stabbed to death by inmates Mario Lara and Rigoberto Sanchez Velasco. Roger Kibbe. This furniture salesman and novice skydiver terrorized the Sacramento area for 10 years between 1977 and 1987. In that time, Roger Kibbe would often prowl California's Interstate 5, leading to his nickname, the I-5 Strangler.
During his reign of terror, any woman driving I-5 at night was warned to be extra cautious.
Kibbe would often kidnap his victims near the freeway, bind them with parachute cord, and duct tape their mouths closed. He would then assault his victims before strangling them with the cord. It's believed that Kibbe killed at least 8 people, and he was eventually arrested and given life in prison. Kibbe's crimes came back to haunt him, as he was strangled to death by his prison cellmate on February 28, 2021.
Yeah, shock from victims' families tonight, guys. Those who were directly impacted by Roger Kibbe and his serial slayings. But some of these families tonight are saying his death comes 35 years too late.
Charles Schmidt. The Pied Piper of Tucson was initially on a good path. He was a talented athlete, had many friends and girlfriends, and was reportedly very personable.
National media pounced, including Playboy and Life magazine, all to see the man, the murderer, with a personality bigger than life.
However, he eventually dropped out of high school after getting suspended and became a repeat killer. He's known to have killed at least 3 people, possibly 4. 2 of Schmidt's victims were his girlfriend and her sister, both of whom were strangled to death.
It was May 31st, 1964, when Schmidt decided to fulfill a longtime desire to see what it would feel like to kill.
Schmidt was serving 50 years in prison when he was stabbed 47 times on March 10, 1975. The attack didn't kill Schmidt outright, but it left him with devastating injuries. He survived nearly 3 weeks, but eventually succumbed to his wounds on March 30th. Whitey Bulger. More than a killer, Whitey Bulger was a crime boss who ran the Winter Hill Gang of Massachusetts.
At the age of 14, Bulger had his first brush with the law, arrested and setting up a lifetime of being on the wrong side of the law.
As part of the Irish mob, the Winter Hill Gang, and Bulger, by extension, partook in all manner of organized crime, including racketeering, money laundering, and trafficking. And yes, homicide. At one point, Bulger was the FBI's second most wanted fugitive, only behind Osama bin Laden. Bulger's old associate Kevin Weeks became a cooperating witness and testified against Bulger, leading to a conviction for numerous homicides, among a laundry list of other serious crimes.
Whitey Bulger was found guilty on 31 counts, including both racketeering charges, and was found to have been involved in 11 murders.
Shortly after arriving at the United States Penitentiary in Hazleton, West Virginia, Bulger was viciously beaten to death by a number of his fellow inmates.
Bulger is the third prisoner killed at that facility just this year.
Donald Harvey. The true number of victims ascribed to Donald Harvey is unknown. Between 1970 and 1987, the Angel of Death worked as a hospital orderly and killed anywhere between 37 and 87 people. He was officially convicted of the former amounts, but he claimed the latter is more accurate.
He was quite bizarre, and on certain levels, raised some doubts as to whether or not this guy was reciting some sort of fantasy.
Harvey used many methods to dispose of his sick patients, including cyanide poisoning, turning off their ventilators, and suffocating them with a pillow. His crimes were eventually discovered in March of 1987, when an autopsy revealed cyanide in one of his victims. The orderly confessed soon thereafter. On March 28, 2017, Harvey was severely beaten by another inmate named James Elliott and died 2 days later.
He placed himself in that position. I really don't have much compassion for him. I said back then, and I'd say today, if he ever had gotten out, he would have continued to kill people.
Richard Loeb. Criminal duo Nathan Leopold and Richard Loeb hoped to devise, enact, and get away with the perfect crime.
Wealthy, well-educated teenagers who had done it, they said, for the sheer thrill.
They decided to kidnap and kill a teenager named Bobby Franks, and they famously enacted the plan on May 21st, 1924.
A ransom note had been sent to his parents, but before they'd had a chance to pay, the kidnappers had killed their son.
The incident resulted in widespread media attention and was even deemed the crime of the century.
I think that the murder said something to people about American society. This was seen as a culmination of trends that were dangerous, that were immoral.
But Leopold and Loeb did not devise the perfect crime. They spent 7 months planning the attack, but it took investigators just over a week to figure it out. Leopold and Loeb confessed to the crime, and both were sentenced to life in prison. Leopold was released in 1958, but Loeb was killed by a fellow inmate named James Day on January 28, 1936. Albert DeSalvo. A man known as the Boston Strangler prowled the city in the early to mid-60s and killed 13 women.
They were young and old, black and white. As the number of victims grew, police became more and more frustrated.
While no one knows for sure, these crimes are largely attributed to Albert DeSalvo. DeSalvo confessed to the killings, but the revelation remains controversial and disputed. However, DNA officially linked DeSalvo to one of the Boston Strangler's victims in 2013, lending credence to the possibility that he killed all 13.
It would appear to definitively determine, in fact, that Albert DeSalvo was the killer of Mary Sullivan.
In November 1973, DeSalvo was stabbed and killed while serving life for assault. While he was never officially convicted, the primary suspect in the stabbing is a Winter Hill Gang associate named Robert Wilson. Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. Jeffrey Dahmer. Perhaps the most infamous serial killer in American history, Jeffrey Dahmer killed 17 people throughout his life, with 16 of these killings occurring between 1987 and 1991.
The majority of those murders happened in an apartment near the Marquette campus.
Dahmer was officially captured on the night of July 22, 1991, and was given 16 life sentences. He served his time in Wisconsin's Columbia Correctional Institution, where he came into contact with a man named Christopher Scarver. Scarver was also serving life for killing a man in 1990. On November 28, 1994, Dahmer was cleaning the prison gym with Scarver when Scarver bludgeoned him with a metal bar.
To many, including Dahmer's own attorney, it comes as little surprise.
I wasn't shocked because I thought that Jeffrey Dahmer would end up this way.
He succumbed to his injuries soon after, and Scarver told a prison guard that God had given him the mission to kill Dahmer.
At his first court appearance, Scarver entered the courtroom singing.
Rain or shine, sharing your dreams.